are non-fungible tokens and there are fungible tokens. Fungible tokens are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those are completely interchangeable. If you have a Bitcoin and I have a Bitcoin, we can trade each other and we don't care, that we traded because they're the same. Non-fungible tokens can be similar, but each one is unique in one way or another. And so they're not completely interchangeable, and you may not, if you trade someone for one, for what they have, even if it's similar, it's not going to be exactly the same. So it's a way to have kind of distinct collectible items that are defined via a smart contract.
So the smart contract allows you to, quote unquote, maybe write code around this one digital asset, right? So you can't change it, whatever that asset may be, right? Which is why this is so important.
Yeah, it's super important. So, right, there's analog versions of this in the regular world, right? So the example I always use is if we jump in and you order an Airbnb, right? You care about what Airbnb you ordered, right? You can't just switch it out. You don't want to show up in your room and it's a different Airbnb that you didn't order, right? That's non-fungible. And then there's fungible things like this glass, right? So this glass right here, I could pick up any other glass that looks exactly the same. I don't care, right? Or a chair is a chair for the most part. You have two wooden chairs, they look exactly identical. Pick one or the other, nobody's gonna get mad at you. They just want a chair, okay? So those are what are called fungible assets. Like your US dollar, again, you don't care which dollar you get, as long as it's a $1 bill, you're good. So that's super important. We have a lot of analogies in the analog world. The reason NFTs are a huge deal, and I'm going to piggyback off of art, and we can kind of get into NFTs will surpass art for sure, right? But this is the medium where it started. So when it comes to NFTs, let's just take analog world of art, okay? Let's say it's a famous art piece. If you look at what's the famous painting with the star? Starry Night. It's by Van Gogh, right?
Starry Night, Van Gogh, beautiful.
The reason Starry Night is one of the reasons that it's worth as much as it is, right, is because Van Gogh, he pioneered a new art form, right? He kind of left classical art, pioneered this new way of painting. And so if you look at Van Gogh, you can tell it's by him, right? Or it's a derivative of him. It means somebody's copying him, right? He was able to pioneer this new art style, and that's why he's such a famous artist. Okay, if you go into the digital world, right, it's really hard to prove that you're the person who pioneered anything, right? Because someone can right-click save, they can scrape the metadata. There's no way to track that it was sent from this email to this email, and then download it on a hard drive and then pass it over here, right? There's no what's called
good point.
There's two really important things, say, in art in general. One is called provenance, and the other one's called chain of custody. So let's start with provenance. It's important to be able to prove who created something and be able to validate it's them. So with art pieces, right, there's ways of proving provenance. There's kind of a fingerprint to how someone paints art, and that's how we do validations. Around signatures, kind of the way to do art, we can see it. But in the digital world, there's not super a way to do that because you can clean anything, right? It's just bits and zeros. So you can just clean your bits and zeros. So there was no incentive for artists to really pioneer art forms inside the digital world, right? I mean, you had, of course, we've had digital art, this website, that is a form of art, but there was no real careers that you could build as an artist in pioneering new work. Right. And NFTs, of course,
no easy ones anyway.
No easy ones.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or ways to really capture the value. So the provenance piece is super important. And then when it comes to collectible, chain of custody is really important. So when you buy a house in the United States, you're going to to do the deed, right? You're going to purchase, you're going to get a deed to the house, and there's this transfer of ownership, right? So you can go to your local courthouse, look up any house, and you can see the chain of custody, right? The same thing happens in the art world. Right. Every time one of these major pieces changes hands, there's this chain of custody where people are taking one deed and they're passing it to the other person. Well, blockchains are really good at chain of custody, right? There's this ledger that every time you exchange a token, you can follow that token over time and see every hand it ever passed into. So NFTs were enabled by smart contracts. And what an NFT is, at least in the art form, is you're going to post, you're basically going to take a picture or you're going to create a piece of art. You're going to save it in what we call IPFS or any other cold storage, decentralized storage. So there's going to be one of one. It's immutable. It can never be changed. And then you're going to have metadata for that token or for that piece of art that's also going to be stored in what's called IPFS, and it can never get changed. So what's going to happen is then we're going to create a smart contract, and we're going to tie a token to that metadata, and it's frozen in time. And that token will always only point to this metadata ever. And then anytime it gets traded, there's going to be a chain of custody, and we can kind of follow the chain of custody.
Holy crap. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I've been trying to research this stuff and like put it together. And what you just said in 5 minutes is the most sense I've ever heard out of any of this. What you're saying is since the creation of smart contracts and how we can trace back the digital ownership as well as who made it, artists, we're about to see a second renaissance of digital art that if now artists can actually be noticed and get paid for their work in a whole new way. And you see this with the Beeple auction, right? That was a famous NFT auction sold for $69 million.
Well, I think you touched on a really important word, like Renaissance. Like if you go back into history, like the Renaissance happened during a time of finance, math, and art breakthroughs. And actually we didn't mention this, but this was kind of the call to Plutus, like in the cards, like, dude, this is the Renaissance. Like this is the Renaissance of our lifetime for sure. And it even matches with what happened back in the last Renaissance. It's art, math, and finance all coming together. So I think that's what we're in.